Hey gang, once again it's time for the Piltdown Superman podcast. My regular readers and listeners know that I'm fond of examining logical fallacies and pointing them out. Some atheopaths on Twitter were on the attack. They seek me out, I don't seek them out. When I would dare to stand up to the mighty atheists' intellects and point out their fallacies and inconsistencies, they would recruit more misotheists and swarm like piranhas. Although they claim to be smarter than everyone else, a basic knowledge of logical fallacies helped me to dismantle their bad arguments. Instead of being intimidating, they were inadvertently funny, which is also tragic because their souls are in jeopardy. They seem to think that more childish attacks would somehow make them look right. That doesn't happen, Buttercup. Their nonsense was such a nuisance, I blocked them. They certainly did not have a rational discussion. Today I'm going to use some fancy words, and I hope people are not intimidated. Stay with me and we'll get through this. But I have to admit that telling atheopaths that their obstreperous vituperative attacks are inconsequential or that atheism is incoherent and lacks the necessary preconditions of intelligibility. Saying that kind of stuff can be fun. You can tell when those types don't understand because they have the brilliant comebacks along the level of, "Oh yeah?" and, "But you're a big dumb stupid head, Louie." Anyway, if you use big words, use them correctly or you'll look silly. Sometimes you can look pretentious anyway, which is kind of fun when somebody is trying to put you down and pretend they're smarter than you are, and then you throw something at them that they can't handle. One time I called Matt Slick's radio show at carm.org, and I used a big word, and he said, "Oh, you're sesquipedalian." Okay. Well, I've never heard that one before, so I had to go and look it up. It meant that I was fond of using long words. In my mind, I've replayed that exchange by saying, I'm not sesquipedalian, I just like polysyllabic words. And there it is. After all that introduction, the big word I want you to be comfortable with is equivocation, and its other form, equivocate. Notice that it resembles the word equal. It falls into the category of fallacy of relevance, but is also a fallacy of ambiguity. These things get These things get ambiguous, so the meanings can be shifted and people are not quite communicating. And there I go again. Sesquipedalian has two meanings. The first meaning was the one that Matt used, that for somebody who's fond of using long words. The second definition actually describes a word that has many syllables. A word itself, sesquipedalian itself is sesquipedalian. It has many syllables. It's polysyllabic. What I would have been doing if I'd called back and said, I'm not sesquipedalian, I'm polysyllabic, I would have been equivocating the meanings of the words for the sake of humor. One famous example, it does not work in print, it's only audio, the movie Airplane. It's strictly verbal. You say, "Surely you can't be serious." "I am serious. And don't call me Shirley." Nice bit of equivocation. I think it's funny. In fact, some of my favorite humor is based on ambiguity and equivocation. People have their own ideas and connotations of words based on their experiences and worldviews. Depending on the occasion and circumstances, people will know exactly what you mean. Like others, I will use Darwinism and evolution interchangeably, but the context is important or people might not catch on to what I mean. Sometimes it's good to avoid certain words, but it's important to define your terms. One place that something similar to equivocation happens is in biblical interpretation. Brace yourself. Illegitimate totality transfer, where people cram all the possible meanings of a word and then they cram it into the word and then foul up the entire context. But that's enough on that one. I'm not skilled enough to discuss it any further, and I need it explained further to myself so I can get a good handle on it. But I suggest that you look up illegitimate totality transfer because cultists and Christian liberals pull this trick. Darwin's cheerleaders frequently use equivocation or conflation, but the differences between equivocation and conflation are inconsequential. But they use equivocation on the word evolution. Sometimes they're uninformed but enthusiastic, but most often, in my experience, they are being sneaky. They want to insist that creationists are wrong, so they change the meaning of the word evolution. Equivocation is often used for harassment, and just like so many other logical fallacies, people will slip in another one on top of a fallacy, like a personal attack or a straw man. I don't have to defend a position I don't take, and don't put words in my mouth. That's a straw man attack and very disingenuous. If I say, even though I'm a biblical creationist, that I believe in evolution, some people might panic and think that I'm compromising. So I have to either avoid the word or specify what I mean. Darwin believed that natural selection caused evolution. Well, it did. We see variations within limits. Darwin used the Galapagos finches as evidence. They had variations, there were apparently extinctions and such, but they were still finches. It was a form of evolution, but it was not molecules to man evolution or goo to you, the general theory of evolution. You have to specify these things sometimes. But these finches were not changing into something completely different. In fact, natural selection was discussed by creationist Edward Blyth in 1835, decades before Darwin wrote Origin of Species. Blyth noted that natural selection actually helped preserve a species, and bad variations led to an animal's demise and weeded out the unfit and the freaks. Evolutionists have largely abandoned natural selection as a cause of goo to you evolution, the general theory that biblical creationists like me reject. See what I did there? I worked in the definition of the word. I didn't just say evolution, I specified which definition I wanted. Equivocation is a bait and switch tactic to move the goalposts so you can't corner them. Evolution has several meanings. The worst meaning is too common because it's used to manipulate and trick people. Evolution is change over time. That's pretty meaningless. I'm reluctant to use the term microevolution. The term is misleading and people think that if there is a little evolution, then there must be a lot of evolution. A little evolution would still require an increase of genetic information, which is not happening. So a little leads to a lot of evolution? Not true. I'll stick to the term variations. Someone actually told me that because I believe in small variations, then I must believe in evolution in general. Don't tell me what I believe, Bubbles. In the debate with Ken Ham, Bill Nye used numerous logical fallacies, and he used equivocation several times. One of his names could be Bill Nye the Equivocation Guy. He equivocated science and evolution, and his fanboys cheered because they do the same nonsense. He also made the untruthful statement that Ken Ham made up the distinction between historical and observational science, which was actually used by evolutionists themselves long ago. Equivocation happens all the time, often by mistake, conversation, casual stuff, but sometimes people will equivocate with an attempt to mislead, 'cause you know sometimes words have two meanings, or more. I love to talk about logical fallacies. I love God and the Bible. I love creation science. I love Auntie Griselda, but I love it more when she goes home. I love cookies a little too much. I love my wife. I love the Christian parody band Apologetics. I love opening many tabs in my Firefox browser when doing research. How many different ways can you use the same word? Context is important, and it helps that you have someone who is familiar with the language and its flexibility so they know what you mean. I've made some ambiguity jokes and puns and sort of thing with people who have English as a second or third language, and I've almost gotten myself in trouble because I had to clarify it. No, I was making a joke and I'm just messing with words. When discussing Bible matters, some Christians need to do more homework. The New Testament was primarily written in Greek, and they used 4 different words for love. People understand things from their own language, culture, biases, experiences, and other aspects of their worldview. Some Christians think that to act in love means to be wimpy or doormats, never standing up to someone or rebuking someone who is in error. They equivocate love with some sappy, emotional, unbiblical thing. I told someone that he was being judgmental and unloving toward other Christians and reminded him of John 13:35. He turned around and attacked me, and he was basically unaware of the difference and somehow thinking that he had the right to be completely unloving and that I wanted him to be sappy and emotional. This is a good time to do something new. Not really sure what to call it. How about the religious people follies? I don't care who you are or what your worldview. Anyone can make mistakes in reasoning. One reason I do these podcasts and have written about fallacies is to help instruct Christians so that they can be on guard against atheistic and evolutionary shenanigans, and to clean up their own acts so that those who hate us will not be able to catch us up on these things. Here's something that he wrote,
God is love. There is no hate in love. There is no fear in love. Anything that promotes love is Christ-like. Anything that promotes hate and fear is anti-Christ-like. Homophobia promotes hate and fear and is thus contrary to Christ.
His chain of reasoning just did not work. Now, there are people who pretend to be Christians and make comments so they can spread their beliefs, and I suspect that he's one of these. Can't prove it, of course. But there are Christians who reason with their emotions and pretend that they are using logic, or think that they're using logic and doing a terrible job. Anyway, this is more than just a problem with reasoning. It's also a problem with not understanding the Bible that he claims to believe.
God is love.
Yep, Bible says that.
There is no hate in love.
Do you have a verse to support that? Do a Bible search on how God hates those who do iniquity. Or Jacob I loved, Esau I hated.
There is no fear in love.
Do you have a verse for that? While it says perfect love casts out fear, context is important. Whenever you're doing anything with understanding the Bible, context is important. It's vital.
Anything that promotes love is Christ-like.
Where does the Bible say that? And what do you mean by love? What's your definition?
Anything that promotes hate and fear is anti-Christ-like.
Can you support that? I just refuted part of your assertion a moment ago.
Homophobia promotes hate and fear and is thus contrary to Christ.
Thanks for bringing in a provocative, meaningless buzzword. This whole thing says nothing. Not only is it full of assertions that have no support, but it has a great deal of equivocation. Definitions of terms are extremely important, especially when dealing with atheists and evolutionists. If you're going to have a meeting of the minds and have a rational discussion, don't talk past each other by one party thinks a word means one thing, the other party thinks another. But don't get ridiculous and make your discussion or article cumbersome. Some people are dense and many just want to waste your time, and you're just going to be defining so many things that nothing ends up being said. Ask questions and get other people to define their terms as well so you're on the same page. Are you comfortable with the word equivocation yet? Maybe you too will become sesquipedalian, especially if you work as hard as I did to learn how to pronounce the doggone thing.